That night, Elena Foster slammed the kitchen door so hard the frame shook, then pointed a red-polished finger at the man in front of her and said a single sentence strong enough to destroy a whole family. Ava needs her biological father. If you cannot accept that, then divorce me. Adrian Miles did not answer right away. He stood still, both hands carrying the scent of machine oil and rotting wood, his eyes going quiet like the sea right before a storm. No one in that house understood that his silence was not weakness. It was the moment a man decided to let go of something that no longer considered him family. A few hours earlier, everything had still looked like a normal winter evening in Port Ormond. Wind off the ocean swept through rows of wooden homes along the road, carrying a sharp salt bite and a cold that crept straight into the bones. Adrian had just gotten off his shift at the offshore wind turbine maintenance station, where he had worked for more than 10 years. It had been a long day, a brutal repair, and a massive blade that only stopped moving when he climbed up himself, despite the safety warnings. He stopped at the small market near the harbor and bought milk, bread, and a warm rotisserie chicken. On the drive home, he thought about Ava. She was 11. She loved Christmas so much she counted down each day on the calendar, and she truly believed that if anyone on earth could fix anything, it was Adrian, the man she called Dad, even though they did not share a single drop of blood. When Adrian stepped inside, the living room pushed out the smell of cinnamon and pine. The artificial tree by the window was already lit, colored bulbs blinking and reflecting on the glass like tiny stars. Ava slid across the wooden floor and rushed into the hallway, her eyes bright the moment she saw him. "Dad, Adrian, did you fix the dollhouse?" Adrian smiled and lifted the small wooden model he had quietly repaired in the basement for 3 straight nights. The pink roof was secured again, no longer loose. Ava pressed down hard with both hands. It did not move. "I told Mom you could fix it," she said, proud and certain. "You always fix everything." The words made Adrian's heart sting, even as his smile stayed in place. If only that were true. In the kitchen, Elena stood with her back to him, stirring a pot of sauce on the stove. Her shoulders were rigid, higher than usual. Adrian had learned to read his wife's mood from that posture alone. When Elena's shoulders rose like that, a storm was forming. He put the groceries into the refrigerator and tried to keep his voice light. "I got the year-end bonus today. Not much, but enough to buy the bike Ava likes." Elena did not turn around. "We need to talk." Those 4 words landed like a verdict. Adrian took a slow breath. "About what?" Elena turned off the burner, set the spoon down, and faced him. She wore a nice blouse, her makeup perfectly done, like she was preparing to meet someone important, not for a family night at home. "I talked to Caleb," she said. The name tightened Adrian's stomach. Caleb Roy, Elena's former husband, Ava's biological father, the man who always had reasons for every absence but had never truly stayed. "About Christmas," Elena continued, her tone steady, like she was reading from a script. "He invited me and Ava to a cabin in the mountains. Ava needs time with her biological father." Adrian frowned. "We already have plans. The church service, the community dinner, your parents." Elena flicked her hand and cut him off. "That's routine, not plans. Ava deserves a real Christmas. A big cabin, a real tree, and her biological father." She hit the words biological father like a hammer. The air in the kitchen turned hard and cold. "I'm the one who's here," Adrian said slowly. "I take her to school, to the dentist. I read to her every night." Elena gave a thin, dismissive laugh. "You're the stepfather. Don't make this about you. You knew what role you were stepping into. Caleb is her real father." Something cracked inside Adrian's chest. Not a loud break, just the final snap of an old board that had been weakening for years. "So, where do I stand?" he asked. Elena shrugged. "Nowhere. Not this time. We leave on the 23rd. If you cannot accept it, you can file for divorce, or I will." Her voice was cold, steady, rehearsed like she had practiced all afternoon. From the living room, Ava called out, "Mom, are we watching a Christmas movie tonight?" Elena did not answer. Her eyes stayed locked on Adrian, waiting for anger, for pleading, for the familiar argument. For years, Adrian had given her all of that. This time, he did not. He thought about the email from Reykjavik sitting in his inbox, flagged for months. The final offer for a technical supervisor position, a job only a handful of people in the industry could ever touch. He had turned it down more than once, only because Elena did not want to leave this coastal town, did not want to leave her beauty salon, did not want to be far from her parents. He thought about his father, a shipyard man who had once told him never to let anyone make you believe you are only allowed to exist because they pity you. "I understand," Adrian said. His voice was strangely calm. "I won't stop you." Elena blinked. "That's it? No arguing? No anger?" "Not tonight," he answered. She turned back to the stove, muttering that he was a coward. Adrian walked past the simmering sauce, past the stack of unopened mail, and into the living room. Ava had lined up the little wooden figures in front of the dollhouse. The father figure stood closest to the door. "Movie?" Adrian asked. Ava smiled, climbed into his arms, and pulled the blanket up. On the screen, an old story about a man who spent his whole life sacrificing for others began to play. Adrian watched without really seeing it. In his mind, every rejected opportunity, every evening fixing things in that house, every belief that they were building a family rose up sharper than the film. Halfway through, Ava fell asleep. Adrian carried her to bed, tucked the blanket up to her chin, and stood there listening to her steady breathing. Downstairs, the house suddenly felt too large, even though Elena was still there. Adrian sat at the kitchen table and opened his old laptop. The email from Reykjavik was still there, like it had never left. He typed slowly, reread every word, then hit send. The small sound of the message leaving his outbox rang clearly in the quiet kitchen. He did not know that in that moment, the man everyone thought was easy to replace had begun stepping into his true place. A man who, once he stood up, would force everyone who had ever looked down on him to look again. The plane touched down in Reykjavik under snowfall so thick the sky and ground blurred together, as if the world had never had borders. Adrian Miles stepped out with his thin jacket in hand, breath turning to white smoke, his heart pounding with the truth that had just taken shape. He had left home, not for a business trip, not temporarily, but truly left. The icy city met him with cold lights and ocean-wet streets. Wind sliced across the square, slipped under his collar, and sank into his bones. Adrian pulled his suitcase through strangers moving fast with lowered heads and heavy shoulders, each carrying stories no one told. Here, no one knew who he was. No one knew he had once been the man who fixed everything in a coastal house, and no one knew he had just left behind a child who called him Dad. The company apartment was high in an old building. A tiny kitchen, a narrow bed, a window looking down on a street where black umbrellas flowed past like a school of fish. He set his suitcase down and stood still for a long time, listening to pipes groan in the walls and the wind strike the glass. The quiet here was not peace. It was a hollow space freshly carved out. The next morning, Adrian followed his new manager to the energy plant. Kenji was tall and lean, his voice gentle, his eyes arriving before his smile. He introduced Adrian to the technical crew with a short, respectful bow. They returned the bow. No one asked where he came from. No one needed the story. Here, ability spoke louder than identity. When Adrian stepped into the turbine area, the machinery roared like a massive beast breathing. He pulled on gloves, climbed the metal ladder, hands gripping each rung. His body remembered the work as an old reflex: climb, observe, fix. Up there, thoughts of Elena and Ava were briefly carried away by the wind. There was only his heartbeat and the sound of steel turning. Kenji watched from below, evaluating. This was not a man who could be replaced easily. Not everyone could stand steady when the wind screamed and the metal shook. Kenji smiled. He had seen the best break here. Adrian did not. But when the shift ended, when the gloves came off and silence returned, everything came rushing back. Adrian opened his phone. No message from Elena, which did not surprise him. She could pretend he did not exist for weeks when it suited her. But Ava was different. Ava had never missed a goodnight text. Adrian typed a few lines, erased them, typed again, and finally sent something simple. "Are you okay? Dad got here safely. I miss you." The message showed as sent, no reply. That evening, he stopped at a small shop under the building and bought a souvenir, a small hand-painted wooden fox, a symbol of protection in local culture. He held it for a long time, imagining Ava placing it beside her bed. He mailed it back to Port Ormond with a short note. "Dad is always here, no matter where you are." The days that followed fell into a repeating rhythm, work by day, an empty apartment by night. Adrian got used to hearing his own footsteps echo in the hall. He got used to eating alone, staring at the city through glass, waiting for a sound that never came. One night he ate hot noodles at a small place near the plant with Jonas, a young engineer. Jonas asked, casually curious, "Do you have family?" Adrian hesitated. "Yes," and "no." Jonas nodded like he had heard that answer many times. "My stepdad raised me from when I was 3, Jonas said. "He never called me his son, but I always called him Dad. Blood does not decide everything." The sentence followed Adrian all the way home. It seeped into his thoughts beside the image of Ava asleep on his shoulder, and the words she had once said, "Dad can fix anything." That night, Adrian checked his phone one last time before bed. Still silence. A heavy feeling pressed on his chest, not anger, not resentment, but guilt. The slow guilt of a man afraid that by leaving he had become exactly what others accused him of being. In the dark, Elena turned over in her large bed in Port Ormond and stared at her phone screen. Adrian's message appeared, then vanished when she locked the screen. She did not reply, not because she did not see it, but because replying would make everything complicated. She told herself she was doing what was best for Ava, that everything would be fine. Thousands of miles away, Adrian lay staring at the ceiling, one hand on his chest, his heartbeat steady but heavy. He did not know that in this silence a game had already begun, and the man everyone thought had been pushed out of their lives was actually standing in the exact position that would change the entire story when he took his next step. The photo hit Adrian's phone screen like a cold knife, no warning, no mercy, and in a single instant everything he'd worked to hold together for days collapsed. It was a night of hard wind in Reykjavik. Snow slapped the apartment window like white sand, falling without pause, indifferent to whoever sat behind the glass. Adrian sat alone at the kitchen table, a bowl of soup long gone cold. He opened social media out of habit, not searching, not expecting, and there it was at the top of his feed. Elena stood in the middle of the frame in a red sweater, smiling like nothing had ever happened. Ava stood beside her, small in a thick coat, hands gripping her gloves. On the other side was Caleb Roy, the man who had disappeared and then returned at exactly the right moment. Behind them was a wooden cabin buried in snow, smoke curling from the chimney, warm yellow light spilling out. A perfect family, a perfect Christmas. The caption under it tightened Adrian's chest, "Christmas with the family," followed by the heart symbols Elena always used when she was showing the world something she wanted them to envy. For the first few seconds, Adrian did not breathe. He did not think. He only stared. It was not exactly jealousy, and not fully pain either. It was a deep hollow, like someone had just taken his right to exist in this story. He zoomed in, looked closer, and saw what no one else noticed. Ava was not smiling. Not the smile Adrian knew, not the eyes that crinkled when she was truly happy. Her mouth was only slightly lifted, like she had been told to stand still, look at the camera, get it over with. Her gaze drifted a little off-center. One small hand clenched so tightly her knuckles looked pale. A sharp chill ran up Adrian's spine. Something broke, and at the same time, something formed. Elena thought she had one. She thought a pretty picture would make the world believe her version of the truth. But she forgot one thing. Adrian had been there every day. He knew what Ava's real smile looked like. He knew when she was only pretending. He locked the screen and set the phone down. Outside, the wind kept screaming. In the next apartment, Jonas played soft music, a faint melody slipping through the thin wall. Everything still looked normal, but for Adrian this was a line being crossed. Memories rose in sharp pieces. Ava asleep on his shoulder during movies. Ava running to the door every afternoon. Ava telling her friend's dad Adrian could fix anything. Then the image of her standing beside another man in a coat too thick, wearing a smile that did not belong to her. Adrian got up and paced the narrow room. For the first time since arriving in Iceland, he stopped forcing himself to stay numb. He did not cry. He did not shout. A cold, clear awareness spread through his chest. He opened his phone again and sent another message. "Ava, if you can read this, remember, Dad is always here no matter what happens." The message sent. Still no reply. Thousands of miles away, Elena set her phone down on the cabin table and let out a relieved breath. The photo had gathered dozens of likes within minutes. People posted holiday wishes and admiration. She glanced at Caleb as he struggled with the fire and told herself she had done the right thing, that this was the image Ava needed, that Adrian would fade away. But Ava sat on the wooden steps outside, quietly pulling off her gloves and staring into the darkness between snow-covered trees. She said nothing. In her mind, the last image before leaving Port Ormond was Adrian standing in the kitchen with his back turned, silent in a way she had never seen. She did not understand everything. She only knew the man who was always there had suddenly vanished. Back in Reykjavik, Adrian sat down and laced his fingers together. He understood one thing with absolute clarity. Being cut out of a photo did not mean he was gone from Ava's life. It meant someone was trying to rewrite the truth. People could stage a perfect moment, but they could not counterfeit a child's emotions forever. That was when Adrian made a decision Elena never saw coming. He would not disappear. He would not fight with rage. He would stand still, gather proof, and wait. Because when the truth grows big enough, it does not need to shout. In the quiet of the snow-covered room, the real power of the man everyone underestimated began to show. That email arrived on a gray morning, and the subject line alone was enough to turn Adrian's blood cold. Legal notice of divorce, filing for abandonment. Adrian stood still in the plant hallway in Reykjavik, surrounded by metal clanging and heavy boots on the floor. But it was like all sound had been pulled out of his ears. He opened the message and read every line slowly. Clear. No room for misunderstanding. Elena had filed. She claimed Adrian left the country with no intention of returning, that he abandoned his wife and her child, that all shared assets should be transferred to ensure stability for the minor. 3 days. Only 3 days after he landed in Iceland. Adrian closed the phone, his hand tightening until his knuckles went white. He did not feel anger first. He felt emptiness, the hollow space where the last piece of trust had just been ripped out. He remembered exactly how he left Port Ormond. Elena stood in the kitchen doorway with her arms folded. No tears, no pleading. She was the one who told him he could leave if he could not handle Ava needing her biological father. She watched him open his laptop, watched him type the acceptance email, watched him click send, and now she wrote that he ran away. Adrian took a long breath and went back to work. He climbed the turbine like every day. Wind cut hard. Steel trembled. Up there, the world narrowed into lines and motion. He worked precisely, no mistakes. The supervisor watched and nodded with approval. No one knew that inside him another battle had begun. At lunch, Adrian sat alone in the break room and opened his banking app. That was the second blow. Notification after notification. Large withdrawal attempts from their joint account. Declines due to missing his signature. Elena had tried to drain everything. Not to survive, but to erase him completely. That was when the emotion changed. No more sadness, no more guilt. Something colder and sharper spread through Adrian's chest, the clarity of a man realizing he is under attack, and if he does not stand up, he will be crushed. He thought of Ava, of the cabin photo, of the forced smile, of the messages that never got answered. The pieces clicked together in a way that made his skin go tight. Elena did not just want to leave him. She wanted to rewrite the entire story. She wanted to turn him into the villain and use the law to lock the final door between him and Ava. Halfway around the world, Elena sat in the cabin living room with her laptop open. She reread the filing, adjusted each sentence, every word carefully chosen. Abandonment, irresponsibility, risk to the stability of the minor. She believed paperwork would speak for her, that distance would protect her. Caleb walked by and glanced at the screen. He did not ask much. He only shrugged. "Your thing," he said, but there was a flicker of hesitation in his eyes that Elena did not notice. She was too busy believing she controlled the board. Back in Reykjavik, Adrian sat in his small apartment under a thin yellow light. He printed the email, printed the flight itinerary, printed the work contract. He created a new folder on his laptop. He did not name it after a feeling. He named it after the truth. For the first time since leaving, Adrian saw one thing clearly. He was no longer trying to save a marriage that was already dead. He was a father facing the possibility of losing a child to lies. And that was when the true identity of the man everyone underestimated began to show. Adrian was not a runaway. He had a clean work record, a legal international contract, a clear paper trail for every step. And most importantly, he was the only person in this story who had not lied. In the silence of the cold apartment, Adrian stared at his laptop screen. His eyes did not waver. He did not plead. If Elena wanted to turn this into a legal war, he would enter it, not with noise, not with rage, but with the truth in his hands. Some people think power belongs to whoever files first. They forget the one who stays standing at the end is the one who controls the ending. Adrian decided to return on a night when the snow fell so thick it blurred the runway, as if the sky itself wanted to stop him from going back to where it all began. But this time he was not leaving in silence. He was going back with purpose. The flight landed at the small airport near Port Ormond before sunrise. Ocean wind hit his face the moment the plane door opened, salty and cold, familiar in a way that hurt. Adrian pulled his coat tight and stepped down the metal stairs. No one came to meet him, which was good. He was not ready to be seen. Not yet. The coastal town looked the same, narrow roads, old wooden homes, seaweed in the air, but something had changed, not the place, but how people looked at him. Adrian felt it as he drove past the town center, glances sliding over him, curiosity mixed with suspicion. The rumor had arrived before he did. He did not go home right away. Instead, he stopped at the local bank where he and Elena had opened their joint account early in the marriage. The familiar counter, the woman behind the glass looking up and freezing for a beat. "Adrian, I heard you left the country." He nodded slightly. "Not exactly forever." She lowered her voice. "Your wife came in here several times. She was very tense. She tried to withdraw all the money. When we refused, she said you abandoned the family and she needed emergency funds for the child." Each word landed slowly and heavy. Adrian was not surprised. It was the final confirmation of what he already suspected. Did she get anything out? No. Without your signature, we could not. But she put a lot of pressure on us. The woman slid a stack of paper through the slot, copies of the declined transactions, time, amounts, everything clear. Adrian took them and thanked her. For the first time since returning, he felt the ground under him steady a little. Leaving the bank, Adrian drove slowly through the old neighborhood. Outside the grocery store where he used to stop almost every day, a few people stood talking. When they saw him, the conversation broke. A woman whispered, not as quietly as she thought. "I heard he ran off with some young woman overseas, just like her before." Adrian walked past without stopping, without arguing. He had learned the truth does not need to fight on the sidewalk. Inside the store, the familiar cashier saw him, and her mouth fell open. Oh my God, so she really lied. Adrian said only one sentence, "I never left Ava." The woman sighed, her eyes softening. "I knew it. She comes in here constantly complaining about everything. But you were always the one who stayed. People in this town have seen it, even if they do not say it." Those words were not loud or dramatic, but they hit the deepest part of Adrian's chest. Not because he needed validation, but because Elena had tried to make him feel alone. He was not. That afternoon, Adrian stopped in front of Ava's elementary school. The gate was locked, the playground empty after dismissal. He sat in the car for a long moment, hands on the wheel. This was where he used to wait every day, where he used to watch Ava run out, backpack bouncing, her smile brighter than the sun. He walked into the main office. The receptionist looked up and recognized him immediately. She hesitated, then called the school counselor. A few minutes later, a middle-aged woman appeared, relief and worry mixing in her eyes. "Adrian," she said, "I am so glad you came back." He did not waste time. "Is Ava okay?" The counselor exhaled. "She is confused." She asked where you went. "I told her adults sometimes have complicated things, but you love her very much." Adrian swallowed hard. "And what did her mother tell her?" The counselor hesitated. "She said you chose a job overseas instead of staying with Ava." The sentence struck Adrian straight in the chest, clean and hard. Every doubt disappeared. No more self-blame, no more gray area. The truth stood naked. Elena had lied, not just to him, but to Ava. When Adrian left the school, the sky was already darkening. Streetlights reflected on wet pavement. He sat in the car, both hands trembling slightly, not from cold. A slow anger rose, not explosive, not blind, but focused, the anger of a father realizing his child is being used. Somewhere else in town, Elena sat in her living room with a phone pressed to her ear, speaking fast, telling the story in the edited version she had rehearsed. She did not see Adrian returning step by step, collecting truth piece by piece. When night fully settled, Adrian checked into a small motel near the coast. He did not go to the old house. Not yet. He placed the papers on the table and lined them up neatly. Each page was a piece of the puzzle: bank, school, the town's gossip. Adrian sat on the bed and pulled Ava's drawing from his pocket, 2 figures holding hands in front of a Christmas tree. He stared at it for a long time. In that moment, the man everyone underestimated was fully revealed. He was not the one who abandoned anyone. He was the only one walking toward a child with the truth, while everyone else hid behind a lie. From that moment on, the game changed. The attorney opened the thick binder, looked at Adrian for a few seconds of silence, then let out a slow breath, like she had just confirmed something important. "If what you are telling me is true," she said, "the person in serious trouble is not you." The law office sat behind an old auto repair shop on the edge of town. No glossy sign, no shining glass. Only the smell of paper and black coffee, and the heavy focus of people used to staring directly at trouble. Maya Harlan sat across from Adrian, dark hair neatly pinned back, eyes sharp but not cold. She did not rush. She read, 1 page at a time, the Iceland employment confirmation, the contract, the plane tickets, the messages to Ava with no replies, the shipping receipts for gifts, The bank records of declined withdrawals, the divorce petition accusing him of abandonment. Maya set the papers down and laced her fingers together. How long after you left did she file? 3 days, Adrian said. Maya raised an eyebrow. 3 days is not abandonment. 3 days is panic. The sentence landed clean and precise. No drama, no judgment, but enough for Adrian to feel something inside his chest click into place. He told her everything. The night Elena gave him the ultimatum, the cabin photo, Ava's silence. His voice did not shake, but the pauses between his words carried weight. Maya listened without interrupting, only taking notes. When Adrian mentioned Elena telling Ava he chose work over her, Maya's pen stopped. She looked up, and her expression changed. "This," she said slowly, "is the most dangerous part." Adrian sat straighter. "She is interfering with the bond between you and the child," Maya continued, "and she is doing it by twisting the truth. Courts hate that. They really do." Outside, rain began to fall, heavy drops striking the small window like a steady drumbeat. Adrian looked down at his hands that had fixed machines, fixed homes, fixed toys. Now he had to learn how to fix a story that had been bent. "What do we do next?" he asked. Maya did not answer immediately. She stood, took a blank file from the shelf and wrote a short title on the front, "Response and Emergency Temporary Orders." "We do not attack," she said. "We respond with facts and we ask the court to protect your contact with Ava immediately." Adrian nodded, not because he understood every procedure, but because for the first time since leaving Port Ormond, he felt someone standing on his side, not with pity, not with doubt, but with steadiness. That afternoon, Adrian returned to the motel and spread every document across the table, sorting, labeling, organizing. He moved like he always did on a turbine repair, patient, exact, no missed details. Meanwhile, Elena sat in her living room with her phone tucked between shoulder and ear, speaking quickly and confidently. "The attorney said everything is fine. He is overseas. He will not react in time." She believed it. She believed distance was her advantage, and Adrian's silence was proof of weakness. She did not know that across town, the man she thought she had pushed out of her life was building something stronger than ever. That night, Adrian sat by the window, harbor lights staining the black water. He thought of Ava, thought of what she would ask if she could speak to him right now, and he made a promise, not with grand vows, but with calm certainty. He would not shout to be heard, he would not beg to stay, he would walk into the room where truth is measured in evidence and let the truth speak for him. People often underestimate a quiet man, and they forget that when he finally stands up, he usually has everything ready. Elena walked into the courtroom wearing the confident smile of someone who believes she has already won before the fight begins. Then she saw Adrian. The moment their eyes met, the air seemed to drain away. Adrian stood when the court called his name, back straight, shoulders solid, in a simple dark suit that fit him well. No show, no pleading, only the steady presence of a man who came prepared. Elena faltered for half a heartbeat. Her smile stayed, but it stiffened like paint drying too fast. The small county courtroom was more crowded than usual. Wooden benches creaked as people sat. The judge had not arrived yet, but curiosity already filled the space. Rumors move fast in this town. Everyone had heard the husband who abandoned his family fled overseas. Everyone came to watch an absent man lose. They did not expect him to be there. Adrian sat down and placed the file on the table. Maya Harlan leaned in and spoke softly. "Stay calm. Let the truth do the work." He nodded. His hand rested on the binder cover, warm and steady, like metal before a bolt is tightened. Elena glanced at her attorney, a young man with a bright tie and an overly confident smile. He whispered something. Elena nodded, controlling her breathing again. She believed Adrian's appearance was only a late attempt at theater. The judge entered. Everyone stood. When they sat, the judge's voice called the case, divorce and child custody. The judge looked through the file, then lifted his eyes. "Mr. Miles, I was informed you left the country with no intention of returning." Adrian stood. His voice was not loud, but it was clear. "I left under a legal employment contract and returned as soon as I learned there was a petition filed. I have never abandoned my responsibilities." Elena's attorney stood immediately, sharp and fast. "My client states he abandoned the family, cut contact, and caused emotional harm to the minor." Maya rose after him, not rushed, not loud. She placed documents before the judge, the Iceland contract, the round-trip itinerary, the messages with no replies, the gift delivery receipts, and the bank records of declined withdrawals from the joint account. The courtroom stirred. Elena's hands tightened. Her attorney paused for a beat. The judge turned pages slowly and stopped at the timeline. 3 days, he said. "The petition was filed 3 days after you left." "That is correct, Your Honor," Maya said. 3 days does not constitute abandonment under any precedent in this county." Elena jumped up. "He ran off with a woman overseas. The whole town knows." The judge stared at Elena. "Mrs. Foster, you will keep order." Maya seized the moment. "Your Honor, since that allegation has been made, we request to call a witness." A woman stood from the back row, plain coat, purse clutched tight, a grocery cashier everyone in town recognized. She walked forward, voice slightly shaky but clear. "Mrs. Foster told a lot of people Mr. Miles left with a younger woman, but I never saw any proof. And seeing him here today, I know that is not true." A wave of whispers swept the benches. Elena turned toward her attorney, panic flashing for a split second before she buried it. She inhaled, ready to fight back. The judge looked at Adrian. "Mr. Miles, do you have anything else to add?" Adrian stepped forward 1 pace. He looked straight ahead, then glanced at Elena, not angry, not challenging, only the look of someone who finally sees the whole picture. "I never abandoned that child. I stayed when others left. I sent messages. I sent gifts. I returned as soon as I learned there was a filing. If anyone cut contact, it was not me." Silence fell over the courtroom, not heavy, not dramatic, but unmistakable. The judge leaned back, fingers laced. "Based on the preliminary evidence, the court finds indications of misrepresentation and interference with the child's relationship with a caregiver. The court will issue temporary orders." Elena stopped breathing. Temporary decision-making authority regarding contact and care is granted to Mr. Miles. Mrs. Foster is ordered to cease any interference with contact. Financial issues will be subject to audit. The words were short and neutral, but for Adrian they felt like the first full breath after weeks of being squeezed. Elena sank back onto the bench, face drained, smile completely gone. For the first time, she understood power does not belong to whoever speaks first. It belongs to whoever speaks truth. When the judge called a recess, Adrian gathered his binder. He did not celebrate. He did not scan the room for approval. He thought of only one thing, Ava. The man everyone underestimated did not need to shout to be heard. He only needed to stand there and let the truth echo through a room full of whispers. Ava stood at the back of the courtroom, small among adults, and when her eyes met Adrian's, the noise around them snapped apart. She let go of the adult beside her and ran. Adrian barely had time to react before Ava wrapped her arms around him, gripping his waist like she believed if she loosened her hold, he would vanish. The impact was not hard, but it made Adrian's heart jolt, sting, then flood. He bent down on instinct, one arm around her back, the other hand on her familiar hair, warm and soft like every night before. "I knew you did not leave me," Ava whispered, her voice trembling but certain. "I knew it." The words were not loud, and they did not need to be. They cut straight through every layer of control Adrian had built over the past weeks. His throat tightened. He did not answer right away. He only held her tighter, like he could send her everything he had not been able to say. Around them, the courtroom emptied, benches shifting, papers gathered, whispers rising and falling. But inside that embrace, the world shrank to two people. A man labeled as an abandoner, a child forced toward a lie, and a truth that finally found its way back. Elena stood a few steps away, watching with a frozen face. For a brief moment, something flickered in her eyes. Not anger, not quite regret, but the late recognition that some bonds cannot be cut with paperwork or words. Then it vanished as quickly as it appeared. She turned away, straightened her coat, as if turning her back could put everything back where she wanted it. The school counselor rested a gentle hand on Ava's shoulder, signaling she could stay a little longer. Ava did not let go. She looked up with red eyes that still shone. "Are you home now, Dad?" Adrian inhaled deeply. "I am here," he said, slow and clear. "I am not going anywhere." Those words were not a promise spoken in a rush. They were a confirmation, something decided long ago, finally spoken at the right time. When they left the courtroom, the hallway felt longer and colder. Fluorescent lights stretched across the tile floor. Ava still held Adrian's hand, her small fingers locked into his. They trembled slightly, like she still could not believe it was real. Maya Harlan stood at the end of the hall and gave a small nod. No congratulations were needed. In cases like this, she knew the most important thing is not the ruling. It is the moment a child finds safety again. Outside, the ocean wind blew hard, carrying salt and cold. Adrian draped his coat over Ava, pulled her hood down over her ears. Ava smiled, a real full smile, not forced, not hesitant. The smile he searched for in that photo, the smile no one could stage. In that moment, Adrian understood something clearly. Real power is not winning a hearing. It is becoming the place a child runs to when the world gets too loud and frightening. The man everyone underestimated did not need to prove anything else. Standing there with Ava's hand in his, he was everything she needed. On Ava's first night back, Adrian woke near dawn to a very small weight settling on his chest. Ava had climbed into bed without a sound, simply pressed her ear against him to make sure his heart was still beating. Adrian opened his eyes in the dark and did not move right away. He laid a hand on her back and felt her quick breathing slow. Ava said nothing. She just wrapped her arms around him like she was holding something fragile. Adrian whispered, his voice low enough to melt into the night, "I am still here." Ava gave a small nod against his shirt and went back to sleep. The old house had never been this quiet. Not empty, not cold, but a new kind of peace, awkward and fresh, like a house learning how to breathe again after a long storm. In the morning, Adrian got up early, made coffee, toasted bread. The oven clicked. Pale light came through the curtains. Ava sat at the kitchen table with her feet swinging, talking about school, about a drawing she was making for the social worker. Her voice was bright, with small hesitations, like she was testing whether this air was real. The guardian arrived that afternoon, a middle-aged woman in a dark coat with a clipboard. She walked through each room slowly, not looking for perfection, only for truth. Adrian answered every question simply. Who takes Ava to school? Who helps with homework? When she is scared, who does she go to? Ava answered the last one herself. She looked up and said plainly, "I go to Dad." The guardian paused her pen for a brief beat, just long enough to recognize something important had been said. The days that followed were not loud. Adrian drove Ava to school and picked her up. He cooked simple meals. They cleaned the house together. Ava brought out the old dollhouse and set it on the living room floor. She moved the wooden figures from room to room, whispering small stories no one else could hear. Adrian sat nearby tightening a loose hinge. The screwdriver turned in a steady rhythm. A slow life, but solid. Sometimes Ava stopped and looked toward the door like she was waiting for an old fear. Adrian did not ask. He understood. Some wounds need time, not explanations, not arguments, only presence repeated day after day. At night, after Ava fell asleep, Adrian sat alone in the living room. He thought about Elena, her eyes in court, the way she looked away. No anger, no victory, just the truth, shifting direction. People often think power belongs to the loudest voice. Adrian knew real power belongs to the one who stays when everything goes quiet. Outside, the ocean wind softened. The porch light cast a warm circle on the entryway. Adrian turned off the lights and passed Ava's room. The door was cracked open. Ava slept on her side with one hand clutching the blanket corner like she was still afraid of losing what she had just regained. Adrian pulled the blanket up and watched for a moment. The man who had been treated like he could be replaced did not need to prove anything anymore. The house was filling again, piece by piece, with things no one can fake. Safety, presence, love that does not need the perfect title, only the right place. The pounding on the door came on a gray morning, hard enough to make the frame tremble like it might rip off the hinges. Elena was back. Adrian set his coffee down slowly, as if any rushed movement could shatter the calm he had built. Outside, ocean wind slapped the porch. When he opened the door, freezing air rushed in with the familiar perfume and Elena's ragged breathing. Elena stood there with wild hair, coat unbuttoned, snow clinging to her boots. Her eyes were red, not from crying, but from fury held too long. "You think you won?" she shouted. "You think a temporary order means you can steal her from me?" Adrian did not step back. He stayed in the doorway, his body blocking the entry. "No one stole anyone," he said, low and even. "Ava is where she is safe." The words poured fuel on her fire. Elena stepped forward, her shoe pressing onto the wet doormat. "You humiliated me in front of the whole town," she hissed. "You turned me into a liar." "No," Adrian said. "You did that yourself." Silence cut between them for a beat. For a brief moment her anger wavered and something fragile showed. Fear, maybe recognition. Then she clenched her hands and crushed it down. An engine sounded behind her. Adrian looked past Elena and saw a pickup parked at the curb. The driver did not get out, did not honk. He just sat there, hands on the wheel, eyes distant and cold. "Caleb." Elena turned and saw him watching. "What are you still sitting there for?" she yelled. "Get out here." Caleb did not respond. He looked at the scene, the door, Adrian, Elena, and something in his gaze had shifted. No confusion, no attachment, only deep exhaustion. He started the truck, backed out slowly, turned, and drove away without a word. Elena stood frozen. A sharp breath escaped her like it could not find language. She spun back to Adrian, voice cracking. "He is a coward." Adrian looked at her without satisfaction or contempt, only a late understanding. "You chose people who leave when the truth shows up," he said. "Ava needs people who stay." Elena shook her head and stepped back like the ground was no longer steady. "You think you are a hero," she said, her voice shrinking. "You think you are her real father." Adrian breathed in. "A real father is the one who does not disappear when things get hard." The words were not spoken to win. They were spoken like a conclusion already proven. Elena turned away with a trembling hand on her car door. She did not say more. She slammed the door, started the engine, and sped off. Tires throwing water onto the curb like a final rage with nowhere left to land. Adrian closed the door. The outside noise cut off. The house returned to its familiar quiet. He leaned his back against the door for a moment and closed his eyes. Not from fatigue, but because he realized something had ended. Somewhere else in town, Caleb sat in his truck, staring at his hands on the steering wheel. He pulled out his phone, typed a few lines, deleted them, then finally sent Adrian a short message. He admitted what he did not know, admitted he believed the easy stories, admitted a hard truth, that the man who stayed was the man Ava needed. Adrian read the message while Ava sat on the living room floor drawing. He did not reply right away. Not because he had nothing to say, but because nothing needed to be said. The truth had found its own way. That afternoon, weak sunlight broke through clouds and lit the wall where Ava's drawings hung. Adrian stood there, looking at the clumsy colors filled with stubborn determination. He understood Elena's collapse did not come from one sentence or one action of his. It came from her own choices repeated again and again. The man everyone underestimated did not need revenge. He only needed to stand steady. Let those who wanted to leave, leave, and hold on to the only thing that truly mattered. That evening, when Adrian thought every door had finally closed, Ava brought him something he was not prepared to face. She placed a small object into his hand, so light he almost thought he imagined it. It was a wooden figure from the old dollhouse set, the father figure, but not the same anymore. The shirt was painted dark brown like the jacket Adrian wore every morning. The hair had little gray flecks dotted in with a child's careful hand. On the base, in the blocky, trembling handwriting of a child, Ava had written one short word. Dad. Adrian went still. Every word got stuck in his throat. He looked at Ava. Her eyes were wide, nervous, and hopeful, like she was waiting for a ruling. I think it looks like you, Ava whispered, because you are always home. Adrian swallowed. He bent down and hugged her, not tight, not rushed, only enough for Ava to feel his heartbeat. It really does, he said. I love it. Ava rested her head on his shoulder and let out a long breath, like she had finally set down a weight she carried for too long. In that moment, Adrian understood the arguments, the paperwork, the court hearing were only the outer shell. The most important decision had been made long ago in quiet evenings, in the moments he stayed when others left. Night fell. Ava slept in her room. Adrian stood at the living room window watching the porch light glow against the thin snow outside. The coastal town was quiet. Wind moved softly. No more pounding on the door, no more accusations. Only a stillness deep enough for him to hear his own thoughts clearly. He thought of Elena, of Caleb, of how people once looked at him like a temporary option, a man who could be replaced, and he smiled faintly, not bitter, not triumphant, only the calm of someone who stood in the right place long enough for the truth to reveal itself. Real power was never about winning a dispute. It was about becoming the safest place in a child's life, showing up when no one claps, quietly doing what is right day after day. Adrian placed the wooden figure on the shelf beside the drawing of the two of them under a Christmas tree. He turned off the light and left the room in a soft glow. An old chapter had closed, not with noise, but with steadiness. If you have ever been looked down on, pushed out of your own story, remember, the truth does not need to shout. It only needs you to stand long enough. And if this story made you think, leave your thoughts in the comments. Share what you would have done. Hit like if it resonates. And subscribe so you do not miss the next stories about people who quietly stand up, not with rage, but with dignity.